A successful realtor, world traveler, wife, and mom. Now, an accused murderer. For the last 14 years, she seems to have been living her best life. But according to police in Texas, she has been hiding a dark secret since 2012.
The Tarrant County medical examiners later determined that she was stabbed more than 100 times.
Police say she is allegedly a cold-blooded killer. The critical mistake this mom turned murder suspect allegedly made that police say helped crack a more than decade-old cold case. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime.
She smiled for the camera in Paris. She smiled for the camera in Jamaica. She smiled for 14 years while a woman she called a friend lay in a cold case file with more than 100 stab wounds on her body for over a decade. Myra Velasquez built a life most people would call a dream. Successful real estate agent in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, wife, mother, world traveler. And now, according to prosecutors in Texas, an accused killer whose entire empire of normalcy came crashing down because of a piece of plastic cutlery she used at lunch. This is the story of Iraima Chavez, 33-year-old woman found stabbed to death inside her Arlington apartment in January of 2012, and the 14-year hunt for the person police say did it.
I want you to meet the victim in this story, Iraima Chavez. She was 33 years old when she was found stabbed to death inside her apartment in Arlington in January of 2012. Police say that she had been stabbed more than 100 times. One of the major pieces of evidence is this video from the night of her murder. It's surveillance video that police say shows a shadowy figure in sweats going up the stairs to Chavez's apartment. You can see they keep their head down. It does appear that they try to open the door, but after that, they just wait. And after about a minute, the door opens and they go inside. Family members went to check on Chavez the next morning and they found her dead.
Investigators say Chavez was stabbed more than 100 times. Not once, not twice, over 100 separate wounds. In the language forensic experts use, that's not just a killing. That's overkill, a term used when the level of violence goes so far beyond what's needed to cause death that it points investigators toward one thing: rage born from intimacy.
Yeah, well, you have to think about, we don't have to prove motive. Well, I say we. I don't have a mouse in my pocket. Prosecutor does not have to prove motive, but you have to think about a motivation, right? And one of the things that you'll get off into the behavioral sciences with is they'll start talking about things like overkill. Well, we see evidence.
Strangers don't usually do this. People who know you, people who are close enough to feel personally betrayed, do this.
Many times when you have these frenzied overkill kind of events, your default position many times is an intimate relationship that somebody is, and I don't mean that like in a sexual sense necessarily, but there is like connection, because you have to have the root of that for the jealousy to be driving this thing, or the anger. Who have you made this angry that they would do this 100 times? And and that's a number that they've put out there, 100 times, and we don't even know.
There was no forced entry into that apartment. No broken locks, no shattered windows. Whoever came through that door that night, Chavez let them in or already had a key.
Now, as you saw in the surveillance video, there were no signs of forced entry into Chavez's apartment. Perhaps it was a sign that she knew her killer. But Chavez's murder went cold. The Arlington City website listed her case as a cold case, and they put this profile up in hopes that someone could submit a tip that could one day lead to an arrest. Police say after they processed the scene, they had one crucial piece of evidence.
Surveillance video from the building shows a figure in sweats, head down, climbing the stairs, hesitating outside the door for nearly a minute before finally going inside. It's grainy, it's anonymous, but it's the only visual record of the last person believed to have seen Iraima Chavez alive. Detectives at the time did what detectives do. They processed the scene. They pursued leads. And they found one piece of evidence that would end up outlasting every other clue in the case: a single droplet of fresh blood on a TV stand in the bedroom, blood that didn't belong to the victim. Lab analysis determined it came from a Hispanic female. It was uploaded into CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. Nothing, no match, no name, no face, just a ghost in a database, waiting.
The strong lead that we had was a droplet of fresh blood that was recovered from a bedroom TV stand inside the apartment. The crime lab determined that the blood sample did not come from the victim, and it belonged to an unidentified Hispanic female. Detectives uploaded the DNA profile into CODIS, which is the national database used to compare DNA profiles in criminal investigations. but we never got a match.
For 4 years, that droplet sat as the case's only real lead. Then, in 2016, investigators sent the sample to a private DNA phenotyping company, one capable of predicting physical traits from genetic material alone. What came back was a computer-generated image of a woman believed to be in her 20s.
Well, and that was the thing where this rendering, where there was 2016, they take this blood droplet, they're able to put together what they believe the killer may look like or who the blood belongs to. And then you look at a picture of Myra Velasquez and it is dead on. And it's one of those things, because I think for a lot of our cases we'll cover, and now with AI, you know, they'll project to maybe what a missing child might look like.
It was an extraordinary piece of technology for its time, and it still wasn't enough. No name, no arrest. The case went cold again, filed away on Arlington's cold case registry, another photo on a webpage that most people would never see.
In 2016, 4 years after Chavez's murder, that blood sample taken from a TV stand in her apartment was provided to a DNA testing company called Parabon Nanolabs. The company was able to put a profile together of what the killer may look like. And this is what they came up with. A woman believed to be in her 20s. Let's just take a moment to talk about this. The fact that technology, even to that point, had developed to where you could create an image just like that is nothing short of incredible. But even with that image, Chavez's case remained cold, allegedly for another decade.
Cold cases don't stay solvable forever. Memories fade, witnesses move, evidence degrades. But investigative genetic genealogy, the practice of matching unknown crime, seeing DNA to distant relatives through consumer ancestry databases, has quietly become one of the most powerful tools in modern law enforcement's arsenal. It doesn't require the killer to be in a criminal database. It only requires a cousin 3 or 4 times removed to have mailed in a cheek swab out of simple curiosity about their ancestry. That's the mechanism that cracked this case wide open.
So in November 2024, our homicide detectives unit met with the FBI and let them know about the unknown DNA profile we had. We asked the FBI if they consider using the investigative genetic genealogy to generate a lead for us. They graciously agreed.
In 2024, Arlington police asked the FBI to help take on the case and test the blood sample using genetic genealogy. Joseph Scott Morgan, professor of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University, longtime death investigator, is going to join me here in just a moment to talk about how that technology works. But essentially, it means that you can match a potential suspect to a DNA sample.
In November of 2024, 12 years after Iraima Chavez was found dead, Arlington police brought that lingering blood sample to the FBI and asked them to run it through genetic genealogy. The Bureau agreed. By January of this year, they had a name, Myra Velasquez, 42 years old, a close friend of the victim, someone who had lived just miles from the crime scene back in 2012, someone who, according to police, had been inside that apartment
police
before.
In this case won't say where they got the break that led them to Velasquez. Eventually, law enforcement, though, zeroed in on her as a potential suspect in January of this year. She's a 42-year-old mom who on social media appeared to work as a real estate agent in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And police say she did know the victim. They were close friends, and Velasquez actually lived close to Chavez back in 2012.
Read that again. Not a stranger, not a random intruder, a friend. Once Velasquez's name surfaced, police didn't move immediately. They built the case quietly, methodically, and with one goal: get a fresh DNA sample without tipping her off. And this is where the story takes its most damning turn. Detectives began surveilling her. They followed her to a restaurant where she was having lunch with friends, living, by all appearances, exactly the untouched life she'd built for over a decade. When she left, undercover officers moved in on the table she just vacated and collected what she left behind: 2 plastic forks, a cup, a plate. Ordinary trash to anyone else. To investigators, it was potentially the key to a 14-year-old murder.
For Velasquez. According to court records, once police narrowed in on her as a potential suspect, they started surveying her. And without her knowing, according to WFAA television, they followed Velasquez to a restaurant where she had lunch with friends. Police say when lunch was over, she left, and then undercover officers moved in and collected 2 plastic forks that she used, and they submitted it for testing. They also tested a cup reportedly and a plate, according to WFAA. Now, police say the DNA from a fork matched the DNA profile of that blood found in the bedroom on the TV stand of Iraima Chavez 14 years ago.
The DNA from that fork was sent to the lab, and it matched. Not a partial match, not a familial lead this time, a direct match to the blood droplet recovered from Iraima Chavez's TV stand back in 2012. Think about what that means. The blood evidence that sat unsolved for over a decade wasn't circumstantial anymore, it was her. And she'd left it behind again, this time on a fork, without ever knowing she was being watched.
Years ago, blood that police long believed belonged to the killer in this case. Police say they got a warrant for Velasquez's arrest in May, and they put her under arrest at a traffic stop last week. She is now charged with capital murder. At this point,
police obtained a warrant for her arrest in May. They took her into custody during a traffic stop. She is now charged with capital murder, the most serious homicide charge on the books, reserved for the kinds of killings prosecutors consider aggravated beyond ordinary murder. Her mugshot has circulated widely since the announcement, and it's a jarring contrast to the beach photos, the vacation snapshots, the pregnant belly pictures from a life that until a few weeks ago looked completely untouched by tragedy. There are still enormous gaps in this story. Police haven't disclosed a motive. They haven't said what exactly Velasquez told investigators when she was interviewed after her arrest, only that it will help in her prosecution, a phrase that raises more questions than it answers.
Miss Velasquez was interviewed, and in that interview, we learned information that will be helpful in that process. I'm not going to disclose that right now. They were friends, and Miss Velasquez had been in the apartment before. But we were able to obtain some information from her in the interview, which will help in...
They've confirmed Chavez's cell phone contained information establishing the relationship between the two women, but they haven't released what that data actually says. And notably, police have stated they are not looking at anyone else in connection with this murder. In their eyes, this case is closed. The courts will decide if the evidence agrees. What's left is the human cost. A detective who broke down describing what it was like to finally tell Chavez's family, after 14 years, that an arrest had been made.
14 years after this murder, and what it was like to share the news with a family that had been waiting for justice and answers for so long.
Telling the family.
Telling the family, that's why being able to share that with the family is why we do this work.
A family that waited more than a decade for a name, a face, an answer, any answer, about who took Iraima from them and why. And a defendant who, if the allegations are true, sat across from that same family for years, offering condolences for a crime she allegedly committed herself. Myra Velasquez is presumed innocent until proven guilty. That principle doesn't bend for public outrage, and it shouldn't. But the evidence trail here is not subtle. A blood match confirmed not once, but twice 14 years apart from two different moments in her life. If prosecutors are right, the same recklessness that left a single droplet of behind at a murder scene in 2012 is what left a fork behind at a restaurant table in 2025. 14 years of vacations, of holidays, of a life fully lived, undone by carelessness at a lunch table. The system took over a decade to catch up to this case. But genetic genealogy doesn't forget, and neither does the family still waiting for the full truth. If you think justice delayed shouldn't mean justice denied, subscribe, follow this case as it heads to trial, and let us know what you think really happened inside that apartment in January of 2012